And welcome back to The Average White Guys. My name's Alex Haynes, one of the owners of A Squared. We're a marketing consulting firm here to help you with a plethora of services, including done-for-you services, one-to-one coaching, and now offering fractional CMO, which means we can help you deliver more things to your clients. Super excited to be here with the amazing, illustrious, good-looking Justice Gatton, who's wearing a deep, dark blue, almost get lost in it like his eyes shirt.
Hey everybody, this is Justin with LLW Properties Community Real Estate Services. We're glad that you are joining us tonight.
What are we talking about, boss?
The art of talking. So we are going to
Talk about talking.
Yes, this is more about how, as an entrepreneur, why talking and communicating is so important when you are talking to either clients or other businesses.
And let's be honest, man, we all know that person who says a lot and actually says absolutely nothing. Whereas some people say very little, and when they speak, everyone gets quiet and listens to them. I mean, you and I both have some people in our lives like that, right?
That's actually one of my stories tonight, yes.
All right, so what is, for business owners, why are we having this conversation?
Being able to talk to people is, I think, the quintessential aspect of owning a business. It is, you have to be able to talk to so many people. We are really going to try and hit on this is not talking about sales calls and how to really land it, but if you are talking to any client or any other business-to-business partner, you want to be able to communicate what you are trying to get across and make sure it's clear and concise. That's why we're bringing this up.
I think this is great. As someone who likes to talk, and I've been complimented that I'm a good talker, I guess, I think this was a really fun exercise. And so we actually came up with a little blueprint for our listeners out there, and we're going to start with know your audience. What does that mean, Justin?
Sometimes you don't want to go into talking too much. We've talked about personality traits in this podcast, and I think that's the biggest thing of knowing your audience. If you're talking to an action person, they want to get to the point, blueprint, they want to know kind of what the guidelines of what you're talking about. That's what we mean by knowing your audience. You don't want to go into a conversation with somebody like me who's knowledge and blueprint and go down a rabbit hole of talking about things. I have a couple friends that I love communicating with them. But sometimes they need to explain 4 different things to get to one point. And by the end of the conversation, I really haven't heard anything. I've lost interest. And now I think I'm even more tired than I was before I started that conversation. That's knowing your audience. And the hard part is those type of personalities, unfortunately, which we'll get to this, aren't listening. They're not paying attention to the cues. And so that's where it's about knowing your audience and how to communicate with them.
I 100% agree. For me, knowing my audience goes even one step further, and that's awareness. So as you mentioned, we should know the person we're talking to and the communication style, but also we should be aware of their level of what you're about to talk about. I'll give a great example. If I said, hey, I do social media and I turn likes into paying clients, you have a good idea kind of what I do, right?
Yes.
Now, if I said to someone who might work in my field, I might say something completely different. So bear with me as I try to get this right. Might say, I focus on creating organic content to drive digital trust and help increase ROI through personal and automated conversion techniques at the end of the day to really bump up closure rates.
I heard organic, ROI. What does organic mean in social media? So yes, that's where knowing your audience, because that would go right over my head on what you're trying to communicate.
Exactly. So understanding the awareness of what the other person, where they're at, and understanding what you do and what you're about to talk about really can dictate how you present material and what you should actually focus on. What would be the next thing we do after knowing your audience?
Knowing your point. And that just means really getting to what the conversation is about. If you're going to talk to a client, they don't want to hear a bunch of jargon, colloquialisms. They don't want to hear things like that are basically have nothing to do with the topic. And again, it kind of ties into knowing your audience, but if you're sticking to the point of hand of what you went into that conversation for, it's going to come across, one, you're going to sound smarter because you actually know what you're talking about. You don't want to start bringing up things that maybe you're not too involved with or don't really know how to keep the conversation going.
Alex Hermosi's talked about this, and it's funny, I'm the one bringing him up and not you. But he actually had a podcast where he was talking about how he would go into a conversation, say a bunch of stuff, only to find out that the person he was talking to knew so much more than him, and he looked like an idiot. And he said, I was talking about points that I should never have been bringing up to someone who already know. This really goes back to know your audience, but still, he said, went to that conversation without a plan. And I failed, right? And so knowing what your point is and making sure you deliver that is huge.
One of the things you can do with that, though, is start with the end. Know going into that conversation what the end result is that you want out of it, and then you're going to be able to really dial in the points of the subject and how to communicate those better.
Yeah, I love that because there's so many things you can do in a conversation, especially when, I come from a marketing background. If no one knew that, right? I only bring it up almost every conversation. And one of the things we talk about is the 3 types of content you can make. You can educate people, you can entertain people, or you can sell people, right? And those 3 types would be the type of conversation you have to know going in what the point you are trying to make and how you want to make it.
And I look at that in a different aspect because I'm dealing with clients like in board meetings. And if I go into those conversations not really understanding what we're trying to get accomplished during that meeting, one, we're either going to get off topic too much, it's going to either take too long, or I'm not going to get this board of directors to actually make a decision at the end. That's really why I think also going to the point helps the whole conversation no matter what you're getting into.
I absolutely agree. And one of the things we're doing right now, even in this podcast, and you brought this up earlier, was active listening. So active listening is a unique skill that does take some time to actually develop. Justin, you brought this up originally, so I'd love for you to kind of expand a little bit about what active listening is to our audience and how to use it.
This is more where you are trying to just, at the end of making the points, maybe asking a few questions to really understand that they understood what you knew or what you were talking about, writing down maybe some of the points of what their questions are, so this way you can reiterate on those. Because if you get done with making all your points, you knew what your audience wanted, and you didn't really hear what their action items were, the conversation's going to go nowhere. It's that being more in tune with what they are wanting out of this conversation after you maybe have given your sales pitch, after you've gotten to know them a little bit. Because at the end, if you're not listening, they're going to think you're disconnected. Some ways to help with this on active listening is once they brought back some of their points, is say, oh, hey, I noticed you said this about the conversation. I'd like to reiterate on that because I want to make sure that we are both on the same page with this. So if you ask their question back, then they know that you are listening what the question was and how to get to the end result of that.
Yeah, it's so interesting how you presented that because I use it in such a different and unique way. And mine comes from being a little more action nurturing and a more focused on sales. So a lot of my conversations, I'm going to be honest, is going to be a sales-oriented conversation. And so I find active listening useful when I want to steer a conversation. Right? I will listen and like you said, bring back up those points they may have made to help me prove a point or get to the point I want to make, right? I'll say, yes, and then lead them to where I want to go. Or it may actually open up new pathways and new opportunities I was unaware about. So I may be thinking I'm going into conversations selling social media, right? And then during this conversation, I'm listening, I'm hearing what this other person is saying, and they may have dropped a huge nugget for me to kind of latch onto if they said, man, I really wish we had, a marketing officer. And I'm like, oh, this conversation needs to shift totally in a different direction right now because they just told me what their need was. And when it comes to sales, we never create desire. We just tap into other people's desires. This is where active listening comes in. If someone tells you their problem, they want you to solve it. So give them that solution. Don't keep talking about what you're doing. Change that subject to meet their need.
Yeah. And it's interesting when you say that we have 2 different types of personalities. And I think you are excellent at bringing out things in me that I'm not normally good at explaining. And so that's your active listening. You're kind of like, I know what point you're trying to get to, but then you really are listening to me to draw that out. And I think that's part of the conversation that is that active listening. It is being able to expand on what that person is wanting. And you excel so much at that. So I've been learning from you on how to listen better to bring those out.
Well, I appreciate that compliment. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Justin got an extra compliment in. He's getting up there. He's catching up to me. And the last thing we want to really focus on today, and this is, I think, something I've gotten better at over time. And as a nurturer, I really struggled with, unless I leaned into my A side, my action side. And that's a call to action. Asking for that sale, asking for that thing. If you have a point in a conversation, you come in with a plan, but then never get to delivering that point, that conversation was pointless.
Yes. I might have mentioned this, I belong to Toastmasters. It's where you learn to be a better speaker. And every single meeting that we have once a week, everybody gives a speech on whatever topic they want to talk about. The biggest thing that I've learned in this is any good speech ends with that call to action. It gives us something to thrive for. It gives us something to go out into the world and be that better person. And now that's when you're kind of giving a speech to an audience. But again, if you are talking to a client or you're talking to another business, just trying to have communication, you still want to leave that meeting letting that person feel like they had a reason for that meeting. Was there a point that sale ended up closing? And that's where I think the call to action comes to.
Yeah, I mean, we've already mentioned this, but you and I have walked away from conversations with a third party having said, we just spent 20 minutes and I have no idea what that conversation was about. Do you? And both of us were like, no, we have no clue what we just talked about for 20 minutes because they told 16 stories and talked about all these different things. And they had no point. They just wanted to talk for the sake of talking. And I think this is where having a call to action is so important. And I'm going to say to all my nurturer people out there, it's okay if someone is listening to you and you get to a point where you have an opportunity to close somebody or ask someone for something. They have given you permission, not verbally, but through the act of listening to you, they have given you permission to say, ask me the question.
Yes.
Right? And I think there's always a disconnect. We're so afraid to offend people or ask too much of people. And so I know this has been an issue for a certain group of people. I just wanted to take a moment and go, it's okay to close. It is okay to ask for a follow-up. Every type of conversation, no matter if it's fun and breezy or a sales conversation or even education, should have a point and a call to action, right? It could be anything from let's meet up again, let's actually book a call to do it to the next level, the next step. Let's all laugh together, and now we know not to, chug a gallon of milk and try to run a marathon. Like you can land any point and wrap up a conversation and have a thing you want them all to do, right? No matter what type of story or conversation you have or sales pitch, there should be a natural, organic, this is what the outcomes should be.
So with that, even with this conversation, this podcast, just know the biggest thing you need to work on is that call to action. That is the point that you need to get across, because you could have known what you're going to talk to your audience about. You could have known the point that you wanted to get across. You could have good action listening skills, that whole point. But if you didn't have that call to action and give them something to leave with that made them feel good, the whole point of it is pointless.
I 100% agree. There's actually, I'm close to the funny story, and then we're going to get to our call to action. I remember someone started a conversation and they stopped halfway through. They're trying to get me to do something and they lost it. They're like, I'm so sorry. I've had a rough day. And they go, all I was really trying to do is I was hoping we could set up a lunch to talk about X, Y, and Z. They just jumped to the close because they realized they lost their entire train of thought. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. I was actually weirdly curious at where this conversation was going because how weirdly badly it was going. I was like, I need to know how this is going to be a good story one day. Well, and it was a good meeting, and I was interested in the product. I think they probably even closed me, but you can have an awful conversation, stop everything, and as long as you still have that call to action, there's still something that you could salvage from that. It's amazing how we will forgive each other and let people and give them a second chance. So our call to action for all y'all listeners, simple. We want you to like our podcast, share it, drop a comment, and hopefully listen to us next time because we are
The Average White Guys.